is peace of mind. You have your relationship back with your loved one who has dementia. And watch the news or sports. That is only going to accelerate the decline. And that's not what we typically want. We want them to have the best quality of life possible. Now, I have a objects are. That could be a closet for all they know. So signs and visuals are really important, especially when it comes to places like the closet versus the toilet room. Those things are really important. So you've got to think of all of this on top of working a full-time job. So that's why you see that this decline in caregivers. Here's the slide that scares me the most. And I think I fell under the obesity ring because you eat your way through problems if you're an emotional eater. But look at this. So we're killing ourselves taking care of people at home who have dementia. And unless you can quit your job and have someone who can pay the bills and take care of everything, if you're living alone, that's not going to happen. So how do you pay bills? How do you have a life? How do you socialize? How do you stay engaged in the world? And here you'll see non-caregivers for stroke, for the top 5 chronic conditions. They have 3.2 is their number, and dementia caregivers are at 5.2. That's the likelihood of you having an event or having the chronic condition. At 60% higher if you just kept your relationship and had a professional take care of your loved one, either in your home or in a care community. You'd be so much healthier. And then, of course, coronary disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and obesity. These are not in order of gap. However, it's between 20 and 60%, depending on the chronic condition. That's a big deal. Do you think your loved one wants you to give up your life for theirs? That's what this is saying. So we need to figure this out. This is a puzzle. There's no right or wrong answers. What we need to do is work together to build a plan based on what Dr. Nieri talked about understanding your loved one's desires. You can wipe away the whole
We're preparing to make a motion, so I just want to give
Oh,
folks a
sorry
chance to
about
ask a
that.
question if they.
Yes, please, I'll take a motion.
Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of case Z21-14 to City Council.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioners. Please vote. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll proceed to the next item on the agenda, item 3R, and we are addressing 3R and 4R simultaneously, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
All right, please present your report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, the application before you this evening, right now, is a request for both a general plan amendment and a rezoning case, which I'll speak to more in depth. Given the complexity of the site. I'm going to get into some pretty good nuts and bolts on this particular presentation, so bear with me. It does bear, and it is worth getting into that amount of description. So the applicant before you is Matt Telbin of Shea Homes, but he's not doing this alone. In concert with the Rovey family and Van Trust on the real estate side, on the industrial real estate side, and Mr. Paul Gilbert for their representation, they are bringing these two cases in front of you. Again, for context purposes, the location is at the northeast corner of 83rd Avenue in Northern, in the red outline as you see. The proposal is to create a comprehensive master plan community. It is a unique set of uses. By that, I mean both residential, mixed use, and industrial employment. You often do not see all of those together. Total acreage for the site is 346 acres. To get into the request a little bit more in depth, item 3R for Legacy Point is a minor general plan amendment, which is outlined in blue on the screen. We are amending the land use map for approximately 78.3 acres. We are going from employment, business, commerce to traditional residential 2 to 5, so from the purple to the yellow, as you see. Item 4R, the rezone request, Z21-06, that's for the entirety of the 346 acres. Now, this case presumes that the annexation and the initial zoning action is approved by City Council. So once that happens, when Council takes action on this particular item, the existing zoning districts will be Suburban Ranch SR 43, Intermediate Commercial the C2, Light Industrial I1, and Heavy Industrial I2. I will have a zoning map to show what that looks like here shortly. They are taking all of those districts and combining them into one Legacy Point planned area development. As I noted before, in the previous case, the existing use is the dairy and agricultural operations. This is unique to this particular site with regard to it takes some time to develop each of these properties, and as such, we wanted to recognize the collaboration in place and recognize that the dairy and agricultural will continue on the balance of the property and only will cease on the property being developed. So when a residential piece comes in, only the operations will cease. The remaining balance of the property will continue those operations until in its entirety, Legacy Point is completely developed out. Kind of going into the contextual around the property, you'll see a number of key items which I'll touch on in the staff analysis. First one is to the north, City of Peoria Pioneer Park. To the east is additional agricultural land and then 75th Avenue. To the south is City of Glendale. To the west is 83rd Avenue. And then, as I talked about, that initial zoning case in 2018, that was Harvest Church that we had talked about. So it's kind of ironic that the next subsequent initial zoning case we had is right next door to this piece. There's also a residential community just north of the church as well. From a conceptual development plan standpoint, as I mentioned, the desire by the project team is to create a comprehensive master plan project with the uses as mentioned. Shea Homes, again, is leading the residential portion of the conversation. From the employment industrial standpoint, that is the Van Trust Real Estate partnership. So given the mix of uses, and as I said, it is unique to have all three, the residential, the mixed use, and the industrial together, that conventional type of zoning that we would normally have is not adequate. Rather, what they're doing is creating modified development standards in order to activate the area for both new growth while also facilitating the expansion of the employment corridor, in particular 75th Avenue. As just for a reference purpose, it's not only the Peoria piece that the Rovies are creating their legacy on. there is also a concurrent annexation rezoning for a similar sized residential community proposed immediately south in the Glendale piece as well. That is separate from the application, but more from a contextual standpoint, just for your information. As you can see in the very bright, colorful graphic on the right, this is a multiple phased project. You will also notice those phasing lines, in particular for phase 1 in the orange and phase 2 in the purple. That is reflective of maintaining those dairy and agricultural operations unaffected until each of those particular parcels develop. So that's why you do see kind of that relatively strange line there. But for purposes of illustrating, when I do speak about phase 1 residential, that is west of 79th Avenue, north of Northern and south of the Salt River project. There's going to be an additional graphic coming up that will better illustrate where that SRP easement is. In phase 2 for the residential piece, that's in purple. That's both west and east of 79th Avenue, south of the SRP easement. And we also anticipate completion of 79th Avenue up to Butler Road, which is where Pioneer Park is at. Phase 3 residential, that's 83rd Avenue to 79th, north of the SRP easement up to Butler Road. That's in yellow. The mixed use in the industrial area, there are no set users as of yet. That will be developing based on market conditions as they come in. And we'll get into a little bit more specifics as to what's anticipated in those areas. First, let me get into the staff analysis regarding the minor general plan amendment. So on the graphic to your right, if you will see the blue hatched area where it says GPA 21-03, that is 78.3 acres. When you modify that particular area, the resulting balance of land uses equals 151 acres of residential, 175 acres of industrial, and 20 acres of mixed use. And the intent of making this change is to create that more unified development pattern, both within Peoria and their connection within their property on the Glendale piece as well. From a contextual standpoint, when staff was looking at this, we not only look at the property in question, but we also look on the surrounding uses as well. And there's a couple of key items that I do want to point out. The first one being is that the existing land use pattern has started to evolve, and in particular, that was with the inclusion of Pioneer Park. That park is a key asset and a needed resource for the existing communities and the residents. And once that was built, it changed the relative complexion of the nearby area. Secondly, 83rd Avenue has become not only a gateway into the community, but also a regional transit corridor for the city as well. So taking those particular items into consideration, when we were looking at this particular request, staff is asking for what is the most appropriate balance between employment and residential uses. The residential adjacent to a transit line in a park are not only compatible, they're deemed highly desirable within the general plan. So it would not be uncommon or going against the general plan if that area was to transition into residential. When you look at it from also the standpoint of being able to consolidate and create a comprehensive approach for the industrial area and create a more encapsulated intensity, that has actually even the interest has picked up with the acknowledgement that a master planned industrial area is coming into Peoria. So normally when we're talking of planning uses, having residential adjacent to industrial is often challenging. So then we get into the particular standards in question, which is a part of the zoning case. The land use plan modification makes sense because of the integrated residential work. The development standards are working within the existing constraints on the property. Both the power lines, the SRP easement, everything else around it. So those residential standards are working with that. They're also creating appropriate buffers from the intensity of that industrial area that's being preserved. So when we're looking at this in its totality, the overall amendment results in a development pattern that keeps within the goals and policies of the general plan. From the rezoning standpoint, this is the 346 acres. As I noted, it presumes the successful completion of both the annexation and the initial zoning case. So the yellow piece that you see in the dark I2, that would be the resulting changes from that initial zoning. But looking at the totality of Legacy Point in the project boundary, that is where you will see the SR 43, the intermediate commercial right at the corner of Olive and 75th, up at the top there, C2 hard corner. The light industrial, which is already currently within the city, and then the I2 piece, the heavy industrial, that is being annexed in from county. Because of the PAD, it allows the ability for the applicant to tailor those development standards. It actually creates a more desirable residential community, and it creates that interest within the employment area. And as I mentioned, they've worked very diligently in creating a nice transition between the two uses because we often do not have those particular two uses next to one another. Diving a little bit more within the residential, this is a conceptual layout that you see on the graphic to the right. They are proposing a diversity of housing product, and they are reaching out to multiple market segments. There are 4 lot sizes. When in the PAD, their analysis was based on our typical R16 standard. And so the lot sizes that you see there, the 40, 45, et cetera, those are the minimum widths of the potential lot sizes. Including the SRP easement, and in addition to the green areas that you see for open space, approximately 28% of the total residential area is reserved for open space. A minimum of 10% of that is deemed as usable, being activated through a number of amenities, and I'll provide you an illustration of that shortly. All of the homes that are being provided are typically within a walking distance of an amenity, and they are creating multifaceted pedestrian linkages throughout the community as well. This is an illustration, a conceptual rendering of what that community might look like upon built out. What you see is the main corridor, approximately midway would be 79th Avenue. These are the potential architectural styles that would be within the community. Now, of course, as we talk through all development, final illustrations would be set as the process continues, but this is the architectural style envisioned. These are some of the amenities within the community. Top left, that would be the entrance off of 79th Avenue. You see the activation of the SRP easement, bottom left. The top right, that is the centralized amenity with pool area and so forth. And there's an additional smaller kind of play and shade area within the community as well. Moving to mixed use. This is on the northeast corner right at 83rd Avenue and Northern. If you recall looking back at the general plan, it was mixed-use neighborhood village. The uses that are being proposed are consistent, the development standards being proposed are consistent with that general plan land use designation. It does allow for a variety of uses, including commercial, retail, high-density residential, and employment or some combination thereof. So there is an expectation of either a vertical or a horizontal mix of uses at that particular corner. Given that there's no set developers looking at it or interest at this point in time, they didn't provide renderings because of the amount of variety that can occur. However, it should be noted that any residential that occurs within that particular area, the open space and amenities will either meet or exceed Peoria requirements at that point in time. So we set basically the development standards for that parcel. Once we know what the final uses will be and what it looks like, then we will shape both the final character and the open space and amenities. And we will look at the connection points, both not only from that particular corner, but how they connect into the main residential area from the shade piece as well. From the industrial use standpoint, as I mentioned previously, this particular application consolidates the industrial intensity, and it actually maximizes the employment corridor along 75th Avenue. And it does so in a comprehensive way, in particular on the infrastructure side for sure. There are modified light industrial development standards, and basically it's for building height only for the most part. And the reason for the modifications is this is being reformulated to meet expectations of today's market and in the future as well. So they're looking at it from not only a comprehensive standpoint within the subject site itself, but also its impact to both the surrounding manufacturer and industrial area around it. Conceptual illustrations were provided within the PAD to provide some flair. The color and materials palette to some degree do create a cohesive nature with both the residential piece as well. There are operational considerations from an industrial user standpoint, so where it is appropriate, they're trying to get that cohesive character together. Where it's not appropriate, you will see those distinctions in creating that unique branding, if you will. Some additional conceptual elevations. So let's talk phased improvements. And I will give credit to the gentleman to the far end of the table and to the and to the project team bringing this application forward. I've never had the pleasure of spending so much time talking about infrastructure improvements as I have on this particular case. And in particular, it requires graphics with symbols and everything else to actually being able to lay it out. And the reason being, again, is we are protecting the dairy and the ag operations until such time that each parcel is being taken down. So some of why you see about 5 pages worth of stipulations or conditions of approval is to acknowledge certain operations need to continue and that those parcel lines need to stay in place. So in particular, I'm just going to briefly walk you through to kind of give you that illustration. I'm not going to get into all the details of this particular graphic. So phase 1, the residential piece. 79th Avenue is the main north-south corridor on that particular one. So not only are they constructing the 79th Avenue entrance, the primary entrance into that phase 1 residential component, they're also constructing the sidewalk from that intersection all the way over to 83rd Avenue. Phase 2, if you could see the aerial underneath, that is primarily where the dairy is at right now. So phase 2 starts some very definite changes on the property. And when it comes in, that's when we are asking for a signal at 79th and Northern. In addition to that, we have sidewalk improvements. We have roundabouts starting to make their way in. And additional median improvements as you see. That 79th Avenue ultimately, at the end of Phase 2, will go all the way to Butler, and it does have an all-way stop at that location. Phase 3 on the residential, as you can see, primarily everything within purple. The mixed-use piece and the industrial area piece, as I noted earlier, those are more driven by market than what we know because Shea is part of this application. So there are provisions and contingencies depending on how exactly this lays out. There is infrastructure in place to serve those areas, adequate infrastructure in place. In terms of public outreach, again, our typical postcards were provided. Legal ad was published in the newspaper, and the site was posted in accordance with city standards. A neighborhood meeting was held on August 12th. It was via Teams. 19 participants, and I was one of those participants. Overwhelmingly, it was project team, city staff, and SRP representatives to the table. We had very limited residents. In fact, the only resident in question asked for a clarification of what we meant by the term mixed use definition. After that, SRP asked a number of questions and then just requested additional coordination from the project team as this project continues to move forward in the process. We have received no opposition or support for this project. However, we have received school district correspondence, and it is within PUSD's boundary. They have participated in the review and communication with the applicant. There is a letter within your packet that identifies that they are in support of the annexation and the zoning of the property to facilitate its development. And they also note within that letter that the developer and the school district will continue to work diligently to finalize a development assistance agreement in the future. So as I start to conclude the presentation, I'm going to go through key findings. From the general plan standpoint, it is in conformance with the goals and policies of the general plan. The traditional residential land use designation is appropriate to achieve a development pattern that both balances the city's economic interest while creates a unified and integrated residential framework that capitalizes on existing public assets. From a rezoning standpoint, the PAD is in conformance with the general plan. The residential provides a number of housing products and types that offer a multiple life cycle housing option for future residents. There is appropriate open space for the residential development, and it establishes a viable and comprehensive approach to the industrial component. The industrial standards are set to meet today's market condition. The mixed-use standards provide an appropriate development pattern that is compatible to the existing and future uses, both existing now and future set by the surrounding areas. And the applicant owner has submitted a signed and notarized Proposition 207 waiver. With that, we are asking Commission to take two actions this evening. First would be item 3R. We would recommend approval of case GPA 21-03 to City Council. The next action item, we would ask that Commission recommend approval of case Z21-06 to the City Council, subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit 1. And I will note that City staff provided an updated Condition 1 for you this evening on the dais. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will take any questions.
There we go. Thank you. Commissioner Fider.
Thank you, Lori. Will the applicant need to come back before the commission and council when the 20 acres of mixed use is planned ultimately?
Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, which item in particular? Once
Mixed use for the zoning.
Commissioner Feider, we are establishing development standards this evening. Should an application be consistent with those development standards, they would then either proceed into site plan amendment or site plan or preliminary plat application, primarily site plan. That would be an administrative process, and it would advance into the development process from there.
Under that circumstance, the final plat would go to council. I mean, is that what you were looking for, Commissioner Feider? Will this go to council at some point as well?
No, I mean, the land, my question was, is the land uses are planned for the other areas of the site, but this one still seems to be fluid, so I was just wondering if we were going to have a chance to see that, so. that's
Mr.
all.
Chairman, Commissioner Feider, there are a number of land uses called out within the PAD. There's also development standards associated with it. Depending on how that mix goes, the setbacks, the building heights, and everything else are set within the PAD itself. Any application for elevations would need to conform with the design review manual in that regard. The character in its totality, we look at it in balance of the rest of the site as well. So it would need to be consistent with what you've seen for illustrations.
Any other questions from any other commissioners? Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you. Thank you for your report, Lori. It looks like a terrific project. It's an oddly shaped parcel. It's got the high voltage line corridor. I understand the limitations there. And I like the fact that we preserved some industrial, commercial components to this. But what assurances do we have that the applicant, the owner, is not going to come back to us when, as these parcels start getting developed and saying, you know, we just haven't been able to sell that industrial portion. We'd like to put more houses there, or on the mixed use piece. That's what concerns me. What does this PAD, does this rezoning, I should say, does the action we're taking tonight assure us that those parcels are going to remain industrial and mixed use?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Nelson, that is a wonderful question. And I would preface it by saying the applications in front of you have been a collaboration between all parties. That has been a question that we have asked. We are comfortable with the team in front of us. We have a wonderful relationship with Shea in understanding what their particular product is and how it's going to function. Van Trust on the real estate side, on the industrial side, has had significant interest in this particular area. To the extent that it is possible, we are confident in moving this and advancing this forward, that it meets the city's economic goals, and that it also provides that balance of land uses. And so you have both workforce adjacent to it, and you have employment. And so for us, this is a good combination moving it forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
And comment on Commissioner Nelson's concern. As I was looking at this, I'm very comfortable with the industrial aspect. It's right next to a substation. I believe that's an SRP substation immediately to the east. Prime location. A few miles to the west, APS is completely inundated with industrial development. I've been involved in every one of those projects. I don't think this is going to sit vacant very long, especially with its proximity to substations. I may be biased, but that looks like a great battery site, if you ask me. Commissioner Feider.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I'm really excited about the industrial aspect of this. Obviously, the available commercial development sites available within the city of Peoria currently are very limited. So to me, this is a net win. This basically opens up a significant piece of property for the economic development team, who candidly doesn't have much to offer to the marketplace. So I love the use, and I love having them join our city. So thank you.
Commissioner Waitman.
Thank you, Chair Alsep. A wonderful presentation. Lori always does well. I think that I'm just going to almost second and third what some of my fellow commissioners were saying. I think this is attractive, and the reason being why is, of course, the employment generation that comes with more, industrial mixed uses and things as such. And I believe that's something that the city needs. I think it's a wonderful presentation of, where we want to go. And myself being a young professional, seeing that develop, I think is definitely necessary. I think it brings employment, it generates employment, and it brings more attraction to the city in some way, whether that's commuting, whether that's living. But I think it would not, as our chair said, sit vacant for long, because it is a very attractive project. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair. Also, Ms. Deaver, great presentation. This is a great project. It's really going to bring a lot of, great jobs and great economic development to the city of Peoria. My only concern, and I think I echo a couple of my other commissioners as well, that mixed-use development on 83rd, I think, Ms. Deaver, you said that 83rd is a gateway into the city, right, coming out of Glendale. Agree 100%. My concern is the high-density residential in that mixed use, because if that is a gateway into Peoria, I don't know if that would be the best representation of that 83rd gateway. That's all.
Any other commissioners? I had a couple clarification questions, if you might, and maybe the applicant would be better to address these. The residential component is labeled R16. You have proposed lot widths of 40, 45, 50, and 60. Is that going to be an aggregate average of R16? Otherwise, the depths are going to be significantly changing within their product range. Sounds a little bit unusual to me. Can you clarify and help me understand that?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, it's a little bit of a misnomer, if you will. It's from a comparison standpoint. The R16 piece is perhaps the thing that is causing the most question in the mind. For comparison purposes, the applicant based the lot standards, and if you see within the table 2 of your packet, they are using that as a comparison compared to the lot sizes that they are proposing. So what you see are both the lot widths and the depths that are attributed to each of those categories. It is more of a naming feature rather than, and so it might, that's where it might be getting the kind of question on.
Okay, yep, agreed. And on the mixed use on 83rd, is it, I didn't look at it in detail enough, is it must be mixed use, or is there flexibility where the applicant can use that for just multifamily if they feel like market conditions change?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, maybe I can provide some insight to that one. So the PAD it identifies the site as a mixed-use site, and we were looking for integrated mixture of commercial and residential uses. So accordingly, in the PAD, the way that's set up is that if a multifamily portion was to come in, it can't occupy more than half of the gross parcel area of it. So what that does is that forces either a commercial execution there or a mix of commercial and multifamily that's integrated together, but it could not be all multifamily.
So the reason I bring that up is I don't know, a month ago, had the case where we are changing it because there was this crazy formula, and I assume we've learned our lesson there, and we're giving them the flexibility so they're not coming back and saying, hey, this formula isn't working for us and we need to adjust it.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, as somebody that's worked with that prior formula for quite a while, I can tell you this formula is workable. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners? And I had one more comment, and this may be obvious. I assume Glendale has had opportunity to weigh in and support.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, yes, because they're the adjacent boundary, we are required to reach out to Glendale. And in particular, we have touched base on a number of items, including on the traffic improvements in question. In addition to, we've been keeping apprised, talking back and forth with regard to the applications in Glendale and our applications as well. So yes, there's been ample communication.
Great, thank you. Another comment from Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mrs. Deaver, on top of that, to piggyback, do we know the status of the annexation and rezoning of the city of Glendale?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schaefer, I will defer to the applicant in terms of where the Glendale application is at right now. They are more in tune, point of contact, so it changes pretty frequently, so I will defer to them for that answer.
Any other commissioner questions? All right. I'll open up public meeting. Is the applicant present? Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. My name is Paul Gilbert. My address is 701 North 44th Street in Phoenix. I'm very pleased to be here. You know, we hear names like the Rovey family thrown about a lot. It's nice, I think, to put a name and face together. And tonight, we have Ron Rovey here. You want to stand up, Ron, and his wife? So you now know what he looks like. We have worked very closely with the Rovey family, and without that close relationship, we would not have been able to bring this project to fruition. At the outset, it's a real challenge for someone in my profession that's paid by the word to not give the whole load of hay at every presentation. But I must say tonight, I'm going to be mercifully brief, and that is occasioned by the important fact that Lori did one heck of a job in this presentation this evening. I commend her for that, and I don't say that very often. I wouldn't say that about Chris, for example, very often, but she gave a very thorough and complete presentation. We have worked very closely with the city all the way through. I want to talk about that just briefly. And I'd like to start by addressing Commissioner Nelson's concern. The very first meeting, which is about a year and a half ago, I think, when we first came and presented this project to the city, it shows you how long and carefully we have worked on this project. The very first issue raised was, how do we know we're going to get the industrial developed? So your staff brought that up in our very first meeting. So we listened very carefully to that, and I just want to talk about the posture this is in. It would have been easy, Shay's the applicant, Shay's the developer, it would have been very easy for Shay just to come in and focus on the residential and say, yeah, there's the industrial. We didn't do that. So right from the outset, we looked around and found an industrial developer. One, not only an industrial developer, but one that had credibility, that had the financial wherewithal, which is very important. A lot of infrastructure that's got to go in to make this project work, and the experience. And we picked Van Trust, and we have brought them in. And I must say, they are very excited about this project. And we already have, I'm not at liberty to announce, but they're in some ways ahead of Shay on the residential. They've already got a major user that's committed. The city is familiar with this user for 17 acres, and they're going forward. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. We know that's an issue, and we think we've addressed it, and we brought a partner in with us that is really going to make a difference. Secondly, I'm just going to be very candid with you. This may be a little more frank than I would normally say, but if you don't keep that industrial, I'm saying simply to you, shame on you. We've given you the tools. It's the PAD, that industrial's locked in, and that won't change unless you change it. So you've got complete control over that. And you can say, when someone comes in, as someone in my position often does, boy, we've tried and we couldn't develop the property, and so please change it, give us apartments or something. I shouldn't make fun of that because I've given that speech enough in my career. But in this case, we're telling you, we carefully measured this out, and part of the general plan amendment is that we're eliminating 78 acres of industrial. And the trade-off for that is we think that what's left is viable, and that you then now have the tools to say, we're going to hold firm on that. And if you don't hold firm, again, pardon my candor, but that's your fault, because we've given you the tools to do it. And this PA zone, excuse me, this PAD zoning gives you the predicate to make sure that that develops as industrial. We're committed to doing it. We've brought Van Trust in, and they're committed to doing it. Now, I also want to address a couple of other things. I like the word Lori used tonight when she said partnership. That's what this has been. We have worked diligently and tenaciously with your staff, with the city manager's office. Thank you, Katie. And it's been a very, very good partnership, and we view it that way. This is a very strategic piece of land. And let me also be candid with you, that if we did not have this PAD, if we did not have the division or the general plan amendment to allow the 78 acres to develop, this wouldn't develop as industrial. One of the main concerns, and with a lot of sympathy on my part, if I were a landowner of the Rovey family, is they didn't want this to go forward piecemeal, and they did not want this to go forward without a comprehensive plan and an ability to bring the whole thing to fruition. It would be a real problem for the Rovey family if it wasn't comprehensive, and if it didn't all tie together so it could all be developed. You can't ask the Rovey family to shut down an operation and then have a risk that the rest of the operation can't go forward because the plan doesn't come to fruition. So what we did is we brought together a very well, carefully thought out, comprehensive plan that integrates well and works. It works for the city, it works for Shea, and it works for Van Trust, and most importantly, it works for the Rovey family. A question was asked about Glendale. There are 120 acres in Glendale, which again complicates the situation for the Rovey family to have to deal with two separate jurisdictions. And so that was part of what we were able to work out with a comprehensive plan. And I use the word comprehensive in the sense that it also included and integrated the Glendale parcel, the 120 acres. We have met with Glendale. We've made good progress with them. We feel very comfortable. It is progressing slightly behind the acreage in Peoria, but it is on track. We're bringing the annexation case forward. We've solved a lot of the problems. We had some unique problems with Glendale, frankly, that we didn't have initially with Peoria. We've addressed those. They've been solved, and that's on track. And it's basically just a couple of months behind what we're doing in Peoria. So it will be one comprehensive plan involving both cities. I also want to point something out that I think is very important in this case. Lori gave you a report on our public outreach meeting. There were very few people that even attended that meeting, and their questions basically did not go to any criticism of our comprehensive plan. Incidentally, that same pattern was replicated in Glendale. We had also very few people, and no one at either neighborhood meeting spoke against or in opposition to this plan. I submit that it is very irregular and uncommon to come forth with a plan with 346 acres that is an infill parcel, because that's what this is, and not have any neighborhood concerns. It's, I think, a great tribute to the master planners that put this together, to Shea and Trust and the city to bring this to fruition. I also want to talk just briefly about the fact that this property would not develop but for this plan, this comprehensive plan that integrates Glendale, Peoria, and everything. So there's been a lot of talk about, well, why hasn't the industrial developed? A good share of this land is general planned and zoned. Well, the reason it hasn't developed is that there hasn't been this comprehensive planning. And two, there have been some challenges with infrastructure. And the infrastructure basically was a major deterrent to this property developing before now. Again, pardon the repetition, but it's an infill parcel that hasn't developed. But that is because there was not this comprehensive plan. And without the balance of uses here, and again, pardon my candor, without the balance of uses that we're proposing, you would not even have 175 acres of industrial to develop. That's what it takes to make this happen. Well, lastly, let me say we stand in complete agreement with all of the stipulations. Again, vindicating how closely we've been able to work with your staff. We're very excited about this and look forward to continuing in the mode of a true partnership, because that's what this has been. So thank you. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Appreciate it. Commissioner Grice?
This may be just more for my information, but on 83rd Avenue, the residential parcel is designated as being in Phase 3. Why is it Phase 3 instead of Phase 1 if 83rd is a prime corridor in the city of Peoria?
That is a question that is, if I tried to answer it, I'd be boxing above my weight. I don't really know the answer to that. Matt, you want to help me with that, or Cindy?
Yeah, sure. Two things. One.
Why don't you come up, give your name and address.
Hello, Commission. My name is Matt Tobin. I work with Shea Homes, 8800 North Gainey Center Drive. The nature of that residential going in Phase 3 is it's also a part of the dairy operation. They grow their farm and their feed for the operation there. So upon the development of Phase 1, we'll move into Phase 2. The dairy operation will shut down. And then, again, at that point, they'll continue to farm that land, and we'll take down Phase 3 at that point. So we can't take it down Phase 1 because it does, again, contribute to the dairy operation that's currently active.
Thank you, Matt. That answer your question, Commissioner?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you. Thank you for your time today and for your report. I just had a quick question. If you can't answer it, feel free to just take this as feedback. Okay. And that would be related to the price, where the housing is going to fall on the pricing spectrum. I know it's early in the process, maybe a bit premature to ask this, but those of us who have children that we're ready to push out of the nest, we don't have an affordable nest to land in the city of Peoria, as some of my commissioners and I have discussed. It's getting very expensive to live here. And I see this as a wonderful opportunity to provide some housing that's a bit more affordable so our kids can stay in the Peoria, in the city we love. So can you speak at all to, is there a price point you're aiming at? I don't know if Matt's more appropriate to answer that or who, but if you can speak to that, and if you can't, I understand.
No, I'd be happy to speak to it, but I'm going to have to speak in generalities. First of all, it is folly to try to put a price point in this market. Costs of everything are precipitously increasing. I will tell you, I have a major client that had to have me go back in, and we had to rescind almost all the offers that we had accepted because we couldn't deliver the price anymore. And that's unfortunately not going to change. So it would be folly for us to try to give you a price point. But I can tell you that one of the beauties of this plan, as Lori pointed out, is we have diversity. So we've got larger lots and we've got the 45-foot wide. So there's going to be a good opportunity, and we'll be very competitive. And there will be an opportunity. I don't like to use the word affordable housing. That connotes some pejorative concepts in some people's mind, but it will be very competitive, and we will have an opportunity for young people to get started. And this plan does that.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Fider.
Commissioner Nelson, I think affordability in today's market is kind of relative, but I think with the smaller lot sizes, I think there's a better shot at that fitting into that classification, even in today's, crazy market. So thank you. Do you know, ballpark, how many lots are planned for the 3 phases?
Just tell me, Cindy, and I'll see. How many? 502.
Give or take.
Then in addition, remember, we have the 120 acres in Glendale, so that will also be part of what we're proposing.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You went easy on me tonight. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do any members of the public wish to address the commission? See none, I'll close the public meeting. Before we take a motion, does anyone from the commission have any further comments? All right. Do we have a motion?
I'm assuming we're going to take these one at a time, so we'll start with
3R. 3R
Correct.
first.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to move that we recommend approval of case GPA 21-03 to City Council.
I'll second.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item 4R, motion.
Mr. Chair, I would like to recommend that we approve case Z2106, that we recommend it to City Council for approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Grice. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Waitman, I second.
Thank you. Please vote. And motion passes unanimously as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any, we have a call to the public for any non-agenda items? Anybody from the public wish to address the commission? All right, we'll move on to 5R, reports from staff.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, just wanted to let you know that our Old Town Holiday Festival and Second Saturdays is merging together for one fun event, Saturday, December 11th. Hopefully we will see you down here. It's in Old Town from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Also, upcoming commission meetings. This was a special meeting we have canceled December 16th, so we invite you back for January 6th in 2022. Yay, new year. Same time, same place. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Do we have any commission updates? All right, see no further business. I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.